Nanda Devi Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Vrinda Devi, Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hare Gopi Janavalabha Girivaladhari Janavalabha Hari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaladhari Yasodanandana Yasoda Nandana Brajagana Nandana Brajagana Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Givanadhari Jana Vallabha Givanadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Givanadhari Jana Vallabha Givanadhari Yasoda Nandana Yasoda Nandana Brajagana Vandana Nandana Brajagana Vandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Gaura Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki His Confounder Srila Prabhupada Ki Shri Radha Krishna Gol Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Mayapur Dham Ki Navadvip Dham Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Ganga Mai Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakta Devi Ki Shri Radha Golokananda Ki Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Govinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So we're continuing our reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, Chapter 11, the expansions of Nityananda. starting at text 38. Translation. The 23rd and 24th prominent devotees of Nityananda Prabhu were Sadashiva Kaviraj and his son, Purushottama Das, who was the 10th Gopal. From birth, Purushottama Das was merged in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and he always engaged in childish play with Lord Krishna. Purport. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, Sadashiva Kaviraj and Nagara Purushottama were father and son, and described the Chaitanya Bhagavat as Mahabhagavan, greatly fortunate. They belong to the Adya caste of physicians. Text 156 of the Gora Ganadesha Deepika says that Chandravali, a most beloved gopi of Krishna, later took birth as Sadashiva Kaviraj. In text 194 and 200, it is said that Kamasari Sena, the father of Sadashiva Kaviraj, was formerly the gopi named Ratnavali in Krishna's pastimes. All the family members of Sadashiva Kaviraj were great devotees of Lord Shiva Mahaprabhu. Purushottama Das Thakur sometimes lived at Sukha Sangara near the Chakadaha and Simurali railway stations. All the deities installed by Purushottama Thakur were formerly situated in Belidanga Gram, but when the temple was destroyed, the deities were brought to Sukha Sagara. When that temple merged into the bed of the Ganges, the deities were brought with Janavi Mata's deities to Sahebara Danga Bedigram. Since that place also has been destroyed, all the deities are now situated in the village named Chandude Gram, which is situated 1 mile from Pralapada, as referred to above. Text 40. Sri Kanu Thakur was a very respectable gentleman, was the son of Purushottama Das Thakur. He was a great devotee that Lord Krishna always lived in his body. Purport. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, to go to the headquarters of Kanu Thakur, one has to proceed by boat from Jikararangacha Ghat station to the river known as Kapotaksa. Otherwise, if one goes about 2 or 2.5 miles from the Jikaragacha Ghat station, he can see Bodha Kana, the headquarters of Kanu Thakur. The son of Sadashiva was Purushottama Thakur, and his son was Kanu Thakur. The descendants of Kanu Thakur know Purushottama Thakur as Nagara Purushottama. He was the cowherd boy named Dhamma during the Krishna Leela. It is said that just after the birth of Kanu Thakur, his mother, Janava, died. When he was about 12 days old, Sri Nityananda Prabhu took him to his home in Kadadaha. It is ascertained that Kanu Thakur was born sometime in the Bengali year 942, which is 1535 AD. It is said that he took birth on the Ratha Yatra day because he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna from the very beginning of his life. Sri Nityananda Prabhu gave him the name Sisu Krishna Das. He was 5 years old. He went to Vrindavan with Janavi Mata, and the Goswamis, upon seeing the ecstatic symptoms of Kanu Thakur, gave him the name of Kanai Thakur. In the family of Kanu Thakur, there is a Radha Krishna deity known as Prana Vallabha. It is said that his family worshipped this deity long before the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When there was a Maharashtrian invasion of Bengal, the family of Kanu Thakur was scattered, And after the invasion, one Hari Krishna Goswami of that family came back to their original home. Bodha Kana had reestablished the Prana Vallabhata deity. The descendants of the family still engaged in the service of Prana Vallabha. Kanu Thakur was present during the Kaitari Utsava when Janava Devi and Virabhadra Goswami were also present. One of Kanu Thakur's family members, Madhvacharya, married the daughter of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, who was named Ganga Devi. Both Purusottama Thakur and Kanu Thakur had many disciples from Brahmin families. Most of the descendants of Kanu Thakur now reside in the village named Gadabeda by the river Silavati in the Midnapore district. Text 41. Udarad Thakur, the 11th among the 12 cowherd boys, was an exalted devotee of Lord Nityananda Prabhu. He worshipped the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda in all respects. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, the Gaura Ganadesh Dipika 129 states that Udaranadat Thakur was formerly the cowherd boy of Vrindavan named Subahu. Udaranadat Thakur, previously known as Sri Udaranadat, was a resident of Satagram, which is situated on the bank of the Saraswati River near Trisabinga Railway Station in the district of Hooghly. At the time of Udharana Thakur, Satagram was a very big town, encompassing many other places such as Vasudevpur, Banasa Bedija, Krishnapur, Nityanandapur, Shivapura, Sanghanarga, and Satagram. Calcutta was developed under British rule by the influential mercantile community and especially by the Suvarnavanic community, who came down from Satagram to establish their businesses and homes all over Calcutta. They were known as Satagrami Mercantile Community in Calcutta, and most of them belonged to the Mullik and Seal families. More than half of Calcutta belonged to this community, as did Srila Udarana Thakur. Our family also came from this district and belonged to the same community. So there's a little bit of history, Prabhupada's family history. The Mulliks of Calcutta were divided into two families, namely the Seal family and the Day family. All the Mulliks of the Day family originally belonged to the same family and Gotra. We also formerly belonged to the branch of the Day family whose members, intimately connected with the Muslim rulers, received the title Mullik. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Anchakanda chapter 5, it is said that Udarandat was an extremely elevated and liberal Vaishnav. He was born with the right to worship Nityananda Prabhu. It also stated that Nityananda Prabhu, after staying for some time in Kadadaha, came to Saptagram and stayed in the house of Udaranadat. The Suvarna Vanik community to which Udaranadat belonged was actually a Vaishnav community. Its members were bankers and gold merchants. Suvarna means gold, and Vanik means merchant. Long ago, there was a misunderstanding between Balasena and Suvarna Vanik community because of the great banker Gorasena. Balasena was taking loans from Gorasena and spending money extravagantly, and therefore Gorasena stopped supplying money. Balasena took revenge by instigating a social conspiracy to make Suvarna Vanik's outcast. And since then, they have been ostracized from the higher castes, namely the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. But by the grace of Srila Nityananda Prabhu, the Svarna Vanik community was again elevated. It is said in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Yat Yateka Vanik Gula Udaran Haite Pavitra Halia Davija Nahika I Hate Chaitanya Bhagavat Anchakanda Chapter 5 Text 453. There is no doubt that all the community members of the Smarnak Vanik Society were again purified by Nityananda Prabhu. In Satyagram, there is still a temple with a six-armed deity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that was personally worshipped by Srila Udaran Dat Thakur. On the right side of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a deity of Nityananda Prabhu, and on the left side is Gadadhar. There's also Radha Govindamurti and Shalagram Shila, and below the throne is a picture of Sri Udaran Dat Thakur. In front of the temple, there is now a big hall, and in front of the hall is a Madhavi Lata plant. The temple is in a very shady, cool, and nicely situated location. When we returned from America in 1967, the executive committee members of this temple invited us to visit, and thus we had the opportunity to visit the temple with some American students. Formerly, in our childhood, we visited the temple with our parents because all the members of the Smarnak Bhakti community enthusiastically take interest in this temple of Udarat Thakur. There's probably a Chutananda with him at that time. 67 was probably Kirtananda. That was the proper term. I was just listening to Prabhupada talk about how the first two dancers in the Hare Krishna movement were Chutananda and Brahmananda. He said that when he started Lord Chaitanya Sankirtan, those were the first two individuals who danced in the temple. I guess that's 26th Avenue. So continuing here, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur adds in his Anubhashya, in the Bengali year 1283 AD, it would be 1876, a Babaji of the name Nitai Das arranged for a donation of 12 bighas of land. It's about 4 acres for the temple where Udaran Dat Thakur worshipped. The management of the temple later deteriorated, but then in 1306, that's 1899 AD, through the cooperation of the famous Balaram Mulak of Hooghly, who was subjudged, and many rich Swarna Nak community members, the management of the temple improved greatly. Not more than 50 years ago, one of the family members of Udaran Dat Thakur, named Jagamohan Dat, established a wooden murti statue of Udaran Dat Thakur in the temple. But that murti is no longer there. At present, a picture of Udarana Dat Thakur is worshipped. It is understood, however, that the wooden murti of Udaran Thakur was taken away by Sri Madhava Mohan Dat and is now being worshipped with a Shalagram Shila by Srinath Dat. Udaran Dat Thakur was the manager of the estate of a big zamindar in Naihati, about 1.5 miles north of Katwa. The relics of his royal family are still visible near the Dainahata station. Since Udarana Dat Thakur was the manager of the estate, it was also known as Udaranpur. Udarana Dat Thakur installed Nitai Gaur deities there that were later brought to the house of the Zamindar, which is known as Vana Yaribada. Srila Udarana Dat Thakur remained a householder throughout his life. His father's name was Shikara Dat, his mother's name was Bhadravati, and his son's name was Srinivas Dat. So extensive information about him. Text 42. The 27th prominent devotee of Nityananda Prabhu was Acharya Vaishnavananda. a great personality in devotional service. He was formerly known as Raghunath Puri. Purport in the Ganadesh Deepika 97, it is said that Raghunath Puri was previously very powerful in the 8 mystic successes. He was an incarnation of one of these successes. 43. Another important devotee of Lord Nityananda Prabhu was Vishnu Das, who had 2 brothers, Nanda and Gangadesh. Lord Nityananda Prabhu sometimes stayed in their house. 3 brothers, Vishnu Das, Nandana, and Gangadesh, were residents of Navadvip and belonged to Bhattacharya family, Brahmin family. Both Vishnu Das and Ganga Das stayed for some time with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Puri, and Chaitanya Bhagavat states that formerly Nityananda Prabhu stayed at their house. 44. Paramananda Upadhyaya was Nityananda Prabhu's great servitor. Sri Jiva Pandit glorified the qualities of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Purport. Sri Paramananda Upadhyaya was a advanced devotee. His name was mentioned in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, where Sri Jiva Pandit is also mentioned as the second son of Ratnagarbha Acharya and a childhood friend of Hridaya Oja, the father of Nityananda Prabhu. In the Gaur Ganadesh Dipika 169, it is said that Sri Jiva Pandit was formerly the gopi name Indira. And 45. The 31st devotee of Nityananda Prabhu was Paramananda Gupta, who was a great devotee of Lord Krishna and highly advanced in spiritual consciousness. Formerly, Nityananda Prabhu also resided at his house for some time. Paramananda Gupta composed a prayer to Lord Krishna known as Krishna Stavavali. In the Ganadesh Deepika 194-199, it is stated that he is formerly the gopi name Manju Medha. That's a book, Krishna Stavavali. That is available. 46. That prayer. The 32nd, 33rd, 34th, 35th prominent devotees were Narayana, Krishnadas, Manohar, and Devananda, who were always engaged in the service of Lord Nityananda. 47. The 36th devotee of Nityananda was Hodai Krishnadas, whose life and soul was Nityananda Prabhu. He was always dedicated to the lotus feet of Nityananda, and he knew no one else but him. Purport. The residence of Krishnadas Hoda was Badagachi, which is now in Bangladesh. Among Lord Nityananda devotees, Nakadi was the 37th, Mukunda the 38th, Sura the 39th, Madhava the 40th, Sridhar the 41st, Ramananda the 42nd, Jagannath the 43rd, and Madhidara the 44th. Purport. Sridhar was the 12th Gopal. 49th. Shrimata was the 45th, Gokuldas the 46th, Hari Harananda the 47th, Shivai the 48th, Nandai the 49th, and Paramananda the 50th. Text 50. Vasanath was the 51st, Navani Hoda was the 52nd, Gopal the 53rd, Sanatan the 54th, and Vishnai the 55th, Krishnananda the 56th, and Salochan the 57th. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anabash, Navai Hudai appears to have been the same person as Hoda Krishnadas, the son of the king of Badagachi. His father was Hari Hoda. Once one can visit Badagachi by taking the Lada Gola Ghat railway line. Formerly the Ganges flowed by Badagachi, but now it has become a canal known as Kalishra Kala. near Mudagacha station is a village known as Shaligram, in which King Krishnadas arranged for the marriage of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, as described in the Bhakti Ratnakara 12th wave. It is sometimes said that Navani Hoda was the son of Raja Krishnadas. The descendants still live in Ruknapur, a village near Vahigacha. They belong to the Dakshina Radhya Kayastha community. But having been reformed as Brahmins, they still initiate all classes of men. 51. The 58th great devotee of Lord Nityananda is Kamasari Sena. The 59th was Ramasena. The 60th was Ramachandra Kaviraj. And the 61st, 62nd, and 63rd of Govinda, Sringranga, and Mukunda, who were all physicians. Purport. Sri Ramachandra Kaviraj, the son of Kadavastik, Chirajiva, and Sunanda, was a disciple of Srinivasacharya and the most intimate friend of Narottam Das Thakur, who prayed several times for his association. His youngest brother was Govinda Kaviraj. Sri Jiva Goswami was very much appreciated of Sri Ramachandra Kaviraj's great devotion to Krishna, and therefore gave him the title Kaviraj. Sri Ramachandra Kaviraj, who was perpetually disinterested in family life, greatly assisted in the preaching work of Srinivasa Acharya and Narottam Das Thakur. He resided at first in Sri Khanda, but later in the village of Kumarnaga on the bank of the Ganges. Govinda Kaviraj was the brother of Ramachandra Kaviraj, the youngest son of Chiranjiva of Sri Khanda. Although at first a Saka, or worshipper of goddess Durga, he later was initiated by Srinivasa Acharya Prabhu. Govinda Kaviraj, who resided first in Sri Khanda and then in Kurma, Narga, but later he moved to the village known as Telia Budhari on the south bank of the river Padma. Since Govinda Kaviraj, the author of two books, Sangita Madhava and Gita Mrita, with a great Vaishnav Kavi, or poet. Srila Jiva Goswami gave him the title Kaviraj, who is described in the Bhakti Ratnakara 9th wave. Kashmira Sen was formerly Ratnavali of Raja, as described in the Gora, Ganades Deepika, 194 and 200. This Chandra Kaviraj and Narottam Das Thakur were like almost inseparable in their friendship. They were just extremely attached to one another. And these pastimes are in the Bhakti Ratnakara. And that when he left his body, Ramachandra Kaviraj, Narottam Das Thakur wanted to basically commit suicide. He just couldn't live without him. He was just unconsolable. And it described there was no end to his crying, and therefore he was actually criticized by the Brahmins as being just a sentimental personality. And he actually had his disciples build a funeral pyre. I don't know what they call it, but pile all the wood up, and he was going to get on there and just funeral pyre. And so he got up on there, and he was going to have his disciples ignite it, light it up. But they implored him and said, we, for ourselves, we don't mind the criticism, but we cannot bear that these individuals criticize you. It's just unbearable that we have to listen to this. And so he changed his mind. But instead, at that point, there's flowers showered down. I guess from the demigods or somebody at that point. So it just illustrated, these Vaishnavas, their attachment for one another. It's just, not just to Krishna, but everything that belongs to Krishna is worshipable by Vaishnavas. Even Krishna's devotees are worshipful. Krishna says that he much happier when the Vaishnavas worship each other than when they worship himself. So text 52. Among the devotees of Lord Nityananda Prabhu, Pitambara was the 64th, Madhvacharya was the 65th, Damodar Das the 66th, Sankara the 67th, Mukunda the 68th, Gyanadas the 69th, and Manohar the 70th. 53. The dancer Gopal was the 71st, Ramabhadra the 72nd, Gauranga Das the 73rd, Sringa Chaitanya the 74th, Minaketana Ramdas the 75th. Purport in the Gora Ganades Dipika describes Minaketa Ramdas as an incarnation of Sankarsan. Vrindavan Thakur, the son of Srimati Narayani, composed Sri Chaitanya Mangala, later known as Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. And he's also considered the last initiated disciple of Nityananda. 55. Sri Vyasadeva described the pastimes of Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. Vyas of pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu was Vrindavan Das. Purport. Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur is an incarnation of Veda Vyas, and also a friendly cowherd boy named Kusuma Pida in Krishna Lila. In other words, the author of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur, the son of Srinivas Thakur's niece, Narayani, was a combined incarnation of Veda Vyas and the cowherd boy Kumsa Pida. There is a descriptive statement by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his commentary on the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, given the biographical details of the life of Vrindavan Das Thakur. 56. Among all branches of Nityananda Prabhu, Virabhadra Gosai was the topmost. His sub-branches were unlimited. 57. No one can count the unlimited followers of Nityananda Prabhu. I have mentioned some of them just for my self-purification. All these branches of the devotees of Lord Nityananda, being full of ripened fruits of love of Krishna, distributed these fruits to all they met, flooding them with love of Krishna. I mean, Krishna, when he comes, we know that he comes, he brings everything with him. You know, he doesn't come by himself. We've heard this numerous times, you know. And the purpose is that so we can give a complete picture of his pastimes, or his Leela, and what his activities in Krishna Loka. And here, even when Lord Chaitanya comes, he brings all his disciples, so we can get a complete picture of what devotional service is. Not only how they interact with each other, but how they interact with Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. I was just reading, actually in the beginning of this Chaitanya, that when Krishna comes, we have these, you know, that we have the story in Krishna book where, you know, they all, you know, the earth is overburdened. They go to the milk ocean. You know, Brahma's praying to Karnadakshay Vishnu to come and relieve the burden. And so that's actually he's the maintenance. He takes care of maintenance in this material world. That's not Krishna's responsibility. Prabhupada explained that. When he came to enjoy, and of course he comes to annihilate miscreants, but he said that it was actually coincidental that he actually, because he only comes once in 1,000 cycles, once in a day of Brahma. But these demons are constantly there every day, every year, day of Brahma. They got to be dealt with. And so Vishnu is dealing with this. He's maintaining, whether it's in this form as, you know, Varaha dealing with, you know, Hiranyaksha, or Nrsingadev dealing with Hiranyakasipu. But when Krishna comes, he's complete. And all of these different incarnations are within Krishna. So they're actually acting also. So it's actually a pretty nice description that Prabhupada gives them. And the idea that's, you know, the time he's coming, which is very it's just a coincidence that there's also this overburden of the earth. And Prabhupada also talks about, of course, we have these 4 ages, and sometimes you keep reading these books, and you can't, in a lifetime, you're not going to know it all, but every time you read, I don't remember reading this, and then you read it again, and so Prabhupada explains that just like there are 4 ages, this is actually chapter 4 of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Each one of these ages are all broken down into different parts. And there are, I think it's 12 parts to each age, and we're at the beginning of this age of Kali Yuga, which is begins with a P. I can't think of it. And then it lasts 36,000 years, and then you have the previous age of Dwarpa Yuga, which is like Sesha Kanda, Sesha Kata, something like Sesha something. Sesha means final. So you have Sesha Leela, with Lord Chaitanya's final pastimes. So Sesha means final. So at the end of Dwarpa Yuga, that 12th section, and the beginning of this one, there's overlapping, and then Lord Chaitanya. Sangya, yeah. So it's Sesha, Sangya. There you go. So Sesha means final of that conjunction. Yeah. So then you have the one, I can't think of it, it begins with a P at the beginning of Kali Yuga, that section, the first 36,000 years of Kali Yuga. Anyway, it's just technical stuff, which ultimately not really going to help us with devotion, but it's just, for some reason, Prabhupada mentions it. Okay, we can probably finish this chapter here, 59. All these devotees had unlimited strength to deliver unobstructed, increasing love of Krishna. By their own strength, they could offer anyone Krishna, love of Krishna. Oh, this is it. If you got it, you can give it. If you're a pure devotee, you have love of God, you can give it. We can give up to whatever we have in our Krishna consciousness. Which, if you look at society, they have to bankrupt everything. We have a lot to give. Purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung Krishna Se Tomara, Krishna Dite Para, Dharma Sakati Ache. In this song, Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes that a pure Vaishnava is the proprietor of Krishna, and love of Krishna can deliver both to anyone and everyone he likes. Therefore, to get Krishna and love of Krishna, one must seek the mercy of pure devotees. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says, Yasha Prasad Bhagavat Prasado, Yasha Prasada Nagati Kutopi. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one is blessed by the mercy of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. By the grace of a Vaishnava, a bona fide spiritual master, one can get the love of Godhead, Krishna, and God himself. This is the same thing that's actually Jesus preached, that you have to go through, as he was the representative of his Father, and that one has to go through this process. Of course, it got him in trouble, but he preached the truth. And 61. 60. I have briefly described some of the followers and devotees of Nityananda Prabhu. Even 1,000-mouthed Seshanaga cannot describe all these unlimited devotees. When an ardent desire to serve the purpose of Rupa and Raghunath, I, Krishnadas, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. So, any comments or something? We're start chapter 12, which is the expansions of Dvaitacharya and Gadadhar Pandit. I think we're out of time. Shri Guru. Oh yes, you gonna say something?